Good day, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Trevor Hall. I am the producer and host of Mining Stock Daily. We'll get into Mining Stock Daily just a little bit, but today I'm just providing a kind of a brief overview of how COVID-19 is really affecting mining and mineral exploration. This is going to be kind of a 30,000 square or 30,000 foot view from the top, not going into every single project or jurisdiction, but obviously it's having a big impact on the industry. So we're going to get into that here. I just briefly wanted to introduce you to Mining Stock Daily. We are a daily news briefing and podcast with some commentary on markets. Sometimes we produce anywhere from 2 to 4 pieces each day. Intraday market commentary, corporate interviews, executive interviews, and then also some post-market commentary. The bread and butter really is pre-market news briefings from mineral exploration headlines out of the day. We typically produce this news briefing each morning, trading morning, about an hour before the market opens. So it's a briefing, so usually about 7 to 9 minutes in total. We do distribute on about a dozen different networks throughout the world. You can find it anywhere you get your favorite podcasts, anywhere from Apple Podcasts and iTunes to Spotify, Google Podcast. We are also on Amazon Alexa. If you are a smart speaker technology user as well in your own home, you can set up that flash briefing as well in the Alexa app. We are also online, obviously, at the miningstockdaily.com. We have a good archive of previous episodes published, along with many of our interviews and corporate updates that we have done throughout almost 2 years now. So I thought before we get started, I wanted to take a little bit of an opportunity to go through a timeline of COVID over the past, 4 months. I mean, I didn't want to do it on a chronological timeline based on COVID. Excuse me. I wanted to provide something that I think most of us on this webinar could also really understand, and we probably look into more times than we would like to admit, but that would be the gold chart. So what I did was I took some interesting events regarding COVID and placed it on what would be the daily gold futures chart here. And so interesting to know, COVID actually was first reported in December 31st of 2019. That was something that kind of caught my attention. That's when Chinese authorities alerted the World Health Organization of pneumonia cases in Wuhan City in China with an unknown cause. That started out as a mystery disease and was first referred to as the 2019-NCOV, which we all know later became COVID-19. And then we move into the new year, more than a week later, January 9th. That is when China reported its first death linked to the new coronavirus. And it's a 61-year-old male who was admitted to the hospital in Wuhan with several underlying medical conditions. And apart from respiratory failure and severe pneumonia, the patient also suffered from an abdominal tumors and chronic liver disease. So there was more going on than just the virus. But 3 short days after that, China shared that genetic sequence of the coronavirus with others, helping other countries in testing and tracing any potential effect. Moving on later into January on the 23rd, and I wanted to point this out because this is when I first caught the headline here. Actually, I was in Vancouver for the Roundup conference, and I happened to just leave the convention center for a little bit of time and get away from the hustle and bustle and grab a lunch. And the TV was on, and they were talking about the coronavirus. I had no idea what they was really talking about because it was just the picture and the TV, and I couldn't hear any audio. That's when the city of Wuhan really shut down on January 23rd, all public transportation, closing the airport and railways. And then we go into February 2nd here, and we can see that that gold trend has a nice upward trajectory right at February 2nd. That's the first COVID death outside of China, which was reported in the Philippines. The patient was 44 years old, Chinese male, and his known companion, a 38-year-old woman, also tested positive for COVID. So we see a little bit of a dip there, still within range of the current trend. But then we really start moving up. We see a nice upward trajectory in the gold price. Midway February 17th, China publishes the paper with detail on COVID-19. And there's a lot of information in there, but it did include that 2% of reported cases of COVID did lead to death. So we see that we see more countries reporting their first cases of COVID-19. Late February, South America reported their first case actually. And we see this thing really expanding throughout February and lead us into March here, March 8th, which is another key day. Over 100 countries reported cases of COVID-19, and that surpasses 100,000 cases. That is when the market overall, including gold market, also saw a lot of liquidation, fleet to cash, major sell-off, a lot of uncertainty, tons of volatility. I think we all remember those days pretty vividly because it was not too long ago. And this is where things really start escalating in the cases of COVID-19 gain exponentially. On March 11th is when the World Health Organization declared COVID a pandemic. And March 19th, COVID surpasses 200,000 cases globally. And think about this, it took over 3 months to reach the first 100,000 confirmed cases, and 12 days later, it reached the next 100,000. It's totally interesting, but it doesn't stop from there. 5 days later, March 24th, 400,000 cases. 4 days after that, 600,000 cases. And lead us not about less than a week ago, April 2nd, cases of COVID-19 surpass 1 million. So I don't know if there's much correlation here between those news events from COVID and the gold price. Obviously, we see a nice upward trend for gold futures contracts here, which is obviously nice to see. But I just thought it'd be interesting to look at the chronological events of COVID and the pandemic crisis we're all living through now and putting it on a gold chart. So you can take that for what you will. I just thought it was kind of interesting to look for. But what does that mean for mining and mineral exploration? Well, I had a nice conversation with Rick Rule yesterday on the podcast, and he obviously mentioned that, well, the only thing certain in mining is uncertainty. So we have a number of things that are really hitting the tape for all speculators and precious metals investors right now. Isolation and lockdown restrictions, we're seeing a lot of operations, producers and exploration projects on isolation or lockdown. They can't get to their projects. We're seeing a lot of producers close up their operations, temporarily suspending operations. Due to that, there's also travel restrictions we've obviously seen worldwide. But because we're closing down operations, many companies are just coming out and saying they're withdrawing guidance for Q1 and maybe in the rest of the year because they don't know exactly when they'll be able to get back and really ramp up work. Some mining companies are still operating on basically a bare staff, as few people as they can. I'm not quite sure if it makes me wonder if that's a good idea or not, but I'll leave that up to you to make your decision because it's your capital that you're working with. We're also seeing smelter and refinery suspensions. So obviously there is a supply shortage of precious metals. And we're also seeing that in the bullion markets. Physical gold and silver on the retail side is hard to come by right now. There are massive premiums because of it. You can pre-order your coins from the mints if you really needed to, but those premiums, I'm not quite sure what they are today. Last week, they were about double of what the spot price was. And ultimately, this really focuses on the exploration side. Financings are becoming increasingly difficult. I'm hearing many reports of companies who are coming into this quarter, Q2, needing to finance. Before COVID, they had a number in their head that could get them through the remaining of the year. Unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of those companies having a hard time financing even half or even a quarter of that, from what I'm hearing from people in the industry. So obviously, volatility is rampant, not only in precious metals and mining and exploration, but obviously throughout the overall markets. And so my recommendation is always to tread lightly. If you want to put capital in, find de-risked plays, specifically on exploration. I recommend looking at companies with plenty of money in the bank that can get them through 1 year, 1.5. That would be awesome. Great packages. Do they have M&I resources? Do they have maybe 1 million ounces or more in that category? That's what I'm looking at. I am not being overly aggressive. However, I will say that the gold chart looks rather bullish right now, and that's about the only bullish chart that I can find almost anywhere. Silver is looking a little bit better, but I'm not there yet. All right, so that's it from me. Here's my contact information. You can always find me miningstockdaily.com. Twitter is the handle Trev A. Hall, and there is my email address. Happy to take any questions. And please, I do encourage you to listen into the podcast. We are actually getting a lot of listeners throughout this market. Each week, we're getting more and more listeners than the week before. So people are tuning in. Sentiment here looks, they're definitely inquiring about precious metals and mining. And you can hit that subscribe button. So, and listen in every day. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it. And take care. Stay healthy, and please wash those hands.